Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Bevel and Emboss from chickencheckit.com and welcome to another Tutorial Tuesday. Today what we're going over is something that's both beautiful and extremely simple all at the same time. Let me show you what I mean. Let me open up this here document, go into full screen, and let's get a nice zoom on this going. There we go. Now, with this effect, it's really what you see is what you get kind of feeling. It's really straightforward and simple to do, but it's still really beautiful. We got this nice cloudy text going on here. It's kind of smoky and cloudy and stuff, and it just looks like we're, floating around in the sky. And again, this is, really straightforward, but I really love how this looks, which is, why I'm making a tutorial on it. Now, before we get into this tutorial, there is a thing or two that you should keep in mind. First of all, I'm not the original creator of this effect. Unfortunately, there was already an effect, or not really an effect, but a tutorial done for this on the PSD Vault. And, PSD Vault has all kinds of, fun effects and all that, but personally, I really prefer videos to text, and I'm pretty sure you do as well, which is, why I decided to create this tutorial for you guys. Now, however, there are a couple of downloads that you are going to need in order to, accomplish this effect the way that you see it in the, the Photoshop document. There are some cloud brushes and some smoke brushes that I'm going to be using. And if you want, you can download some hot air balloons to throw in there as well to, give it that more, in the sky kind of feeling. But I'm not going to bother with that in this tutorial simply because I really don't care for hot air balloons. So once you've got the cloud brushes and the fire explosion brushes downloaded, you should be set to go. So having said that, let's get cracking on this effect. Let's make our new document here. And I like my 1080p resolution, so I'll keep that for my width and height. And of course, the 72 pixels per inch RGB color mode. And this time around, I'm going to set my background contents as white. So let's hit OK, hit Ctrl-0 to zoom into canvas size, and let's get going. First off, let's go ahead and double click our background layer, and we will name this Sky. And with sky selected, let's go to effects and apply a gradient overlay. And so let's click the gradient to edit it. And let's change the black slider to a bright blue color, which is 0AEBFF. And we'll hit OK. And for the white slider, we'll change that to a slightly darker blue of 0895BC. And if you hit OK again. And I'll move this off to the side so you can get an idea of what this looks like. It's just a really simple light blue to slightly darker blue gradient. Nothing fancy or anything like that. Nice and simple. And so next up, let's start adding in all of the clouds. So I'm going to add in a new layer. I'm not going to bother naming it just because there's going to be a whole crap load of these layers pretty soon. Let's go to our brushes by hitting the letter B on our keyboard. Let's right click on the document. And let's click the little cog icon in the top right hand corner of that box. And let's load up the cloud brushes by Blaster. And for this, we'll just hit OK to load up those brushes. And you'll see we've got 10 cloud brushes plus some text thing that we're not going to be using here. Let's double click the first brush. Make sure our foreground color is set to white with an opacity of 100% and a flow of 100%. And we're just going to click somewhere in the middle of the document to create that first set of clouds. And from here on, it's going to be really straightforward. Let's make a new layer, right click, double click the second cloud, add that into the middle, and then repeat. New layer, third cloud brush, click, and essentially just go through until you have a layer for each cloud brush. Alright, so now I've got a layer for each separate cloud, and now what I'll do is swap over to my move tool, and we want to start moving each of these clouds around to a different area on the canvas. And the easiest way to do that is by going up to the move tool, making sure that's selected, and then checking auto select. And with auto select enabled, all we have to do is click and drag, and we will be able to move some clouds around. So let's just start moving crap around and see where we put them. So let's maybe toss these up there. Maybe we'll put those right there as a filler. These clouds, let's put them in the bottom right. These clouds, we'll put those bottom left. And maybe we'll put these over there as well. And just basically kind of do, let's put that there and move these a little bit more up. That looks a little bit more like how it should be. Let's put those over there. We're keeping things really simple here. We're not doing anything too labor intensive. We're just kind of throwing some clouds around randomly. And so next up, we want to create, obviously a more cloudy effect. So let's start by, duplicating some of these clouds. Select layers 1 through layer 10 and duplicate the whole lot of them by hitting Control or Command J on your keyboard. And so now let's go to layer 1 copy. Let's turn off auto select and let's move around whatever layer 1 copy happens to be. In this case, it's these clouds right here. And essentially, we'll just throw this somewhere where they start just adding in a little bit of filler to, the empty parts on the document here. So essentially, just go through all of these copies of the clouds, move them around, wherever they just seem to fill up those gaps that we created with the original clouds, and try to create something that flows and, obviously makes sense. So I'm just going to quickly go through, try and create something that looks nice, and I'll be back in just a hot second. Alright, so we're off to a good start. We've got all these duplicated clouds scattered around to fill in some of these spaces, and nothing really looks like it's duplicated just yet, so that's obviously a good start. However, we do want to add in some more clouds to kind of add a little bit of depth and, kind of make it look like there are some clouds kind of receding into the background. So to do that, here's what we're going to do. Let's select layer 10 through layer 1 copy. We'll duplicate those again with Control or Command J, and we'll set all of these to a blend mode of overlay. So now, once again, we're essentially going to be doing the same thing with scattering these layers around. However, we're going to have a different mindset with this. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go to layer 1, copy 2. Let's move that somewhere into maybe the bottom middle here. And you can kind of see that with the blending mode of overlay, it looks like these are a little further into the background because they're slightly faded and, they're just, it's kind of the same color as the background there. Now, most people would consider this good enough and just kind of leave it as it is. However, I do want to add a little bit of depth with a little bit of a Gaussian blur. So let's just go to Filter, Blur, and add a Gaussian blur, and we'll just keep that at about 4 pixels and hit OK. And at the same time, I'm also going to tone down the opacity just a touch and just kind of, position that accordingly. And we're essentially just going to do this for each copy of the cloud here. So let's go to copy 2. Let's move that around. And I'm going to reapply that Gaussian blur by hitting Control or Command F. And maybe I will put it, maybe more up here and tone down the opacity just so that way it's kind of like a foggy rendition of a cloud. And let's go to layer 3, copy 2, kind of do the same thing. Hit Control F to blur that up. And let's put that maybe off to the side over here. Tone down the opacity just a little bit so it blends a little bit nicer. Not too bad. And let's just keep going through. Apply that Gaussian blur and tone that down. We're getting a really nice smoky feeling now. And sometimes, like with clouds like this, you might want to apply the Gaussian blur a second time to blur it out even more. So just an idea to keep in mind there. And so this is essentially all you're going to be doing is just throwing things around randomly, hope that they fit, and of course, use your judgment to determine what would look best where. So there we go. We've got all of these clouds just kind of scattered around, blending modes changed up, and we're having a really nice looking effect. But, that's just the clouds. Let's start getting into the text. So just so that there's not a whole bunch of clutter with all these clouds, I'm going to select all of them and put them into a group by hitting Control or Command G and simply renaming the group to clouds. Voila, nothing difficult. So now let's go ahead and swap to our text tool by hitting the letter T on our keyboard. And the font that I'm going to be using is Lucida Handwriting. And that should be a font that comes with Photoshop, so you shouldn't have any issues on that aspect. For the font size, it doesn't really matter, but you can set that to like 72 points if you so choose. The anti-aliasing, I'm going to have that set to smooth, and of course the font color is going to be white. So with all that in mind, let's click somewhere and add in our cloudy text. And to really quickly resize this, I'm going to hold the Control or the Command key, depending on whether you're on a PC or a Mac, and that will bring up this little bounding box around our text, and we can simply click and drag on that bounding box while holding Shift, and we can make some appropriately sized text. So I'm going to make that about that size, whatever that is. It says it's at 207.86 points. I'm going to let go and kind of position this somewhere in the gap between these clouds. And so that's looking like it's in a good spot, so we'll hit the check mark up top to commit that transformation. And there we go, we've got some nice text as a base for our cloudy text. So to create our cloudy text, we're essentially going to be using our brush set that we downloaded earlier called the Explosion brush set. So let's switch to our brush tool by hitting the letter B, and let's make a new layer. Let's just call this Smoky Text. I'm not really sure if Smoky has an E in it, but whatever, I really don't care right now. And let's right click on our canvas, click the cog, and load the Explosion brush set, and we'll hit OK. And the explosion brush we're going to be using is this second one right here, so we'll give that a double click. So let's open up our brush panel over on the right hand side over here. And if you don't have that, you can just hit F5 on your keyboard or go to Window Brush. And for the brush settings on the right hand side, let's toggle the shape dynamics. And for the shape dynamics, we're going to have a size jitter of 60% with the control off, a minimum diameter of 0%, an angle jitter of 80%, again with the control off, a roundness jitter of 25%, once again with the control off, and the minimum roundness of 25%. And along with that, make sure you have smoothing and protect texture checkmarked. So with all that, let's close up our brush panel. And I'm going to use the left and the right bracket keys on my keyboard to size down and size up my brush respectively. And so let's size this down to about a appropriate size for the text here, so a little bit smaller than the font. And all I'm going to do is click and drag very carefully along the text here. And I'm not really seeing it a whole lot, so I guess that means I need to size up my brush a little bit. There we go. That's looking much better. And so we're getting a good idea of where that's going. So that's the C. And let's just continue on through the rest of the text really quick. Alright, so I've just really quickly did a once over around the cloudy font. So let's just for a second turn off the cloudy text to get an idea of what this is starting to look like. Obviously, it's not that great, but we have a good idea of how this is going to turn out. And let's go ahead and turn back on the cloudy text, but I'm going to lower the opacity of that to something that just kind of serves as an overall outline of the font here. So I'm at about 30%, that's looking pretty nice. And I'm going to go back to the smoky text. I'm going to add some larger brush strokes here and there, so maybe along the side of that. Make that look a little bit more smoky. And of course, I'll also do a smaller brush to kind of fill in some of those areas of the font there. Alrighty then. So I'll just kind of do the same thing throughout the rest of the text. I'll kind of fill in on the main portion of the text, and I'll also kind of go back and add in some of these larger splotches here and there, just to kind of give it a little bit of a feeling to it. And a good idea, actually, is to not do this at a brush opacity of 100%. Rather, go to your opacity and change that to 50%. So that way, when you do some of these larger strokes up top, they're more like a slight addition rather than something that's completely overwhelming. But when you do that, you will have to remember that you need to go over your font a couple of times to really bring in those clouds that you want to add in. So you have to click and drag a couple of times to kind of fill in on some of those areas. And, you know, you kind of get the general idea as you go through. So remember, you don't really have to hold back when you're adding in these clouds, because really the more that you add in, the better the overall effect is going to look. So I'm really going to try and just show you what it's like when you be reckless with this, because, you know, it's not really that bad looking, because this texture, or rather the brush that I'm using, is really nice. I really like how this looks. And overall, the effect that you get from it, it really adds to the overall thing here. And we're almost done, so you won't have to tolerate my random blabbering for too much longer. We're almost there. Let's just add in a couple more wisps around here and there. And let's just kind of do a nice bit of a trail going off over there. Beautiful. Okie dokie then. Now let's go ahead and hit Control-0 and turn off our cloudy text to see kind of what it is that we've got going on here. So we're not off to a bad start. I do want to go in and add in a couple strokes here and there on the inner part of the sea, because it looks like it's a little empty in there. But overall, this isn't half bad. Now, I do want to add a little bit of depth onto this text, so that way it looks like it has a little bit of a shadow on it. And the best way that I know of doing that, or not really the best way, but the simplest way to do that, is by going to Effects and go to Gradient Overlay. Or sorry, not Gradient Overlay. What am I talking about? We need to do a Bevel and Emboss. Goodness, that's embarrassing. And let's just put this down here just so we have an idea of what this looks like when we're doing this. Maybe I'll bring this up a little bit. There we go. So for the depth, I'm going to change that from 100% to 460%. And the size is going to be set to 2 pixels with a soften of 4 pixels. We'll set the screen to 100%. And for the shadow mode, we'll keep that at 75% just for the time being. But we'll change the color to a slightly dark blue of 089 FC2, and we'll hit OK. And right here, it's really up to you how intense you want the shadow to be. Personally, I think 75% is a little bit too intense on the shadow, so I'm going to tone that down just a touch just to see what I like. And I'm thinking right around there is looking pretty good. I'm at about 46% opacity. So that's relatively straightforward. Let's hit OK. And you know what? Let's go ahead and start adding in some more of that smoky brush around the word cloudy, just so that way it kind of blends with the rest of the background here. So let's add a new layer. Let's add in some extra smoke. Said that kind of funny. And again, keeping our brush opacity down to something kind of tolerable, let's just drag some really large smokiness around the word cloudy here. Really make it extremely cloudy. Look at that. That adds so much to it, so much better. But, you know, at the same time, we could probably add this into the clouds around it to fill in some of those gaps that we're still missing. So let's add another layer, add in some smoke clouds. This time around, let's put the brush back up to 100%. And start adding these in on these missing areas. So like down here on the bottom, kind of needs some more clouds. Maybe somewhere on the sides. Maybe a couple here on the top would look nice. And on the sides. And let's tone the opacity down a touch again and add some more smoky ones around. Alright, so maybe I went a little bit too hectic with that, so maybe I'll tone down the opacity just a touch. But at the same time, I kind of like it, but I don't know. I guess I just went a little too haywire on that. However, overall, this effect still looks pretty decent. My Photoshop is making weird noises. Either way, you have the general idea of how to go through and create your own cloudy text effect. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any, comments or anything like that, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed the tutorial, give this video a like. And also, be sure to pay a visit to the original tutorial, leave them a comment, things of that sort. And that's all I've got for you guys for today, and I will see you next Tuesday.